Hello YouTube, Byron at Splitting Slices. Well, I'm in today's shop and I'm going to be starting the third of a series that I call the Shop Sharp series. And we are going to introduce you today to this piece of equipment, which is a semi-automated, fully motorized woodworking fabricator called a shaper. Now, the shaper is used in woodworking to do two primary tasks. One, it allows you to create stocks or lengths of fabricated trim pieces. What do we mean by a trim piece? A trim piece is a length of board or wood that has had milled slots and grooves in a particular decorative pattern, milled or fabbed into the wood. The shaper allows us to create those milled lengths of trim stock and be used for a variety of woodworking tasks. It can be used as baseboards in a house. It can be used as wainscoting or chair rail in various rooms of a home. It can make decorative crown molding that goes at the top or ceilings of various rooms in your home. And for our purposes here in cabinet fabrication, it's primarily used to make door stock. And what I mean by door stock is we create lengths of milled, trimmed wood where you then cut into pieces and use to create a panel door for a cabinet. This is the primary piece of equipment that we use to create all of our trim stock here at the shop. So what is a shaper? Well, a shaper is basically a base that houses a motor, usually either direct drive or belt drive with a series of pulleys and belts, that ends up driving this, which is a shaft. Now this shaft or spindle is machined to allow various rotary cutters. Here I have a couple orange rotary cutters and we have one green one installed in the machine currently that rotate at high speed, and because of their chisel ground edges that are on the edges of the cutters will cut the various grooves and slices and curves that we want in our trim piece. Now this machine will spin anywhere from 10 to 20,000 RPM. So it's a very high speed machine and therefore requires safety and diligence in operating. Now, one of the ways that we can be safe by operating this machine is to use this additional attachment that's in yellow and silver and black that you see at the top of the machine. This is called a power feeder. And what the power feeder is a series of 2 or 3 rolls that are motorized with gears inside this black box and then powered by a motor. It turns at a relatively low speed, but what it does is it gets rotated and placed on top of your long length of board that you're going to run through the machine, and will slowly feed and hold that board down through the machine so that the rotary cutters can do their job. By using this piece of equipment, it makes it for a safe operation for the operator. Now, a couple other things obviously are inside, are the motorized motor that's inside here. It runs at 3 horsepower, again 10 to 20,000 RPM. We have the on-off switch and controls box here with a palm safety stop. You can use your palm or your knee quickly to shut off the machine. And we have a safety lockout, which basically allows you to turn this red dial and then use a padlock to lock that dial out, which will cut power to the machine to make sure no little grubby hands comes in and turns the machine on by accident. It's a good feature if you have any children that are going to be inside your shop. Now, what we're going to do is go ahead and show you a couple other features of the machine. We have the cast iron and machined table that is here on top. This allows you to both set up and run your boards through the machine. We have a wood fence that's located on both sides of the cutter. This allows the board to be put up flat against the fence and be run straight through the machine. Of course, your powder feeder system helps with that endeavor. And finally, we have a dust collection system, which is at the rear of the machine. It's hard to see from your view, but basically we have a hose that is attached to the back of a metal box that feeds into a dust collection system. We use this system to go ahead and collect all the chips and dust that are created by the machine. So these are the basics of a shaper. Let's go ahead and show you how the rotary cutters are removed and inserted into the machine, show you their various chisel edges, and then we're going to run a board through so you can see how it operates. Stay tuned. All right, so this is a view of the top of the machine where you can clearly see the tabletop of the machine that holds the wood and the cutters. We have a groove that is put through the top of the machine that allows for a jig to be run through that can be used to hold your pieces as you're machining them. We have our fence, and of course we have our spindle with a double nut fastening system and the rotary cutters. I also have two sets of orange rotary cutters here, so you can kind of see some of the different shapes of the cutters and their chisel edges. Now what we will be doing is removing the green cutter and using our system of adjustable wrenches. We'll go ahead, stack these three cutters together to form a set that looks like this, and we will install one of the sets in the machine to get ready to machine a piece of wood. Stay tuned. All right, I've installed the rotary cutters into the machine. Saved you about 10 minutes worth of setup time video watching. Basically remove the green, stack the three onto the spindle, and used a set of adjustable wrenches to tighten the two bolts down, and using the top of the spindle with flats to hold the spindle in place while I tightened on the nuts. So that's all taken care of. Now what I've got here is a gauge block that's showing the end grain of a sample piece of wood, and we are going to basically use our rotary cutters to machine this pattern into the edge of a wood block. So if you notice, it's got about a 1/4 inch 45-degree chamfer from the top of the board. We have then about a 1/16 edge going straight down. We plunge into the side of the board that's basically 3/8 long by a 1/4 inch high. And finally, we have about 3/16 baseboard at the bottom. So our rotary cutters were inserted with this exact pattern so that when this board is placed up against the fence, you will see that the chisel edges of the cutters match perfectly with this overall profile. And it's the cutters that will indeed machine this profile in. Now we use gauge blocks, which is what this block is, as a way to basically adjust the vertical location of the cutters in relation to your board. So what we'll do is we'll take that block, put it right up against the fence, and make sure that our cutters fit nicely into those existing grooves. Then we'll take our boards that don't have grooves in them and put the grooves in them for our door stock. So let's go ahead and we'll get this lined up and we'll show you what it looks like. All right, so I adjusted the vertical location of the rotary cutters on the spindle, and I've placed the gauge board up into the cutters. And you can see now that how the chisel edges fit nicely and up against our gauge block. So now what we can do is we can remove the gauge block, we can lock down the location of the cutters in the vertical plane, and then we can go ahead, set up our power feeder, locate it down on top of an 8-foot board, and then turn the machine on. That's what we're going to do, and we'll show you how these cutters work in action. All right, so I have adjusted the power feeder to be in line with the board that I'm going to use to run through the machine. What I'm going to do now is add a safety jig that we use on the machine that is called a feather board. Now what a feather board does is basically hold a piece up against a fence and keeps that board from moving both away from the fence and also accidentally up and out of the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and try to install this without knocking the camera over so you can see how this works. So basically there are two steel guides located on this plastic jig. And if you'll notice, there are little pieces of plastic, or what we call feathers, that have spaces in between. They're flexible and they spring. The idea is you slide the feather board so that the steel guides fit into the table of the shaper, and then you push ever so gently up against the gauge block, and then you turn the hand clamps down and locks that into the table. Now what this does is basically, again, puts tension on the feathers and puts the tension up on the gauge block against the fence. This helps hold the piece in place and square against the fence while you're running the board through. All right, we're going to go ahead and give you shots now of the machine in action, both from the back of the machine, so you can see the power feeder and how it is oriented in relation to the board. And then we'll also show you the piece coming out of the machine with the newly formed grooves and slots. Stay tuned. Okay, so before we turn on the machine and put this board through the shaper, I wanted to quickly show you the power feeder and its orientation to the shaper. So the power feeder rotates on this large shaft, and then the head of the power feeder rotates on this horizontal shaft. Now these series of clamp bars and handles that are attached to jack screws allow the machine to be oriented in different axes and eventually set down on top of the board and then locked in place with these clamp locks so that it's stationary and will properly run the board through the machine. We're going to go ahead and pause briefly, and then when you come back, the machine will be on, the vacuum system will be on, it will be quite loud, but we're going to go ahead and run the board through the machine. Here goes.